Many women don't begin their archetypal journey with a quest to go out and seek their fortune. They begin by descending into the depths. What the world might mistake as collapse, grief, or even losing your way is actually the first step of the archetypal feminine underworld journey.
Welcome to Chiron Art Therapy. I'm Maggi Colwell, an art therapist and Jungian. Here we explore archetypal images, personal symbolism in art and dreams, and what your psyche is trying to tell you. If you're ready to dive into your inner world, you're in the right place. Subscribe, and let's begin. Today we're going to talk about the concept of descent. And I think in general, people are more familiar with the hero's journey through Joseph Campbell and the TV series that was done on Joseph Campbell's work. But Joseph Campbell really took all of his stuff from Carl Jung and from Erich Neumann and built on it. But we're more familiar with that name. I want to talk a little bit about the feminine journey rather than the archetypal masculine journey, because we're all familiar with that. And most of us are old enough that as we were growing up, we didn't see a lot of feminine heroes in the shows we were watching when we were kids. And if they were feminine heroes, Wonder Woman comes to mind, they still had to be sexy. There was a kind of a double standard of connecting with the masculine gaze. My childhood was She-Ra or Tila in the He-Man series, and still needing to have that strong male partner. And we're starting to see a lot of movies now that are not just a girl put in the main character role and then going through the hero's journey, but the women going through a feminine death and rebirth and initiation cycle, and that mythic cycle of becoming who you are and figuring out your way in the world from a feminine perspective and not just a female overlay on the male pattern. We can go into examples if you want to. One of my favorite examples of that is Encanto. The main character, she has to figure out who she is, and it's all within this milieu of her family and really not knowing who she is. And rather than having to go through slaying the dragon and trials, and it's really a lot of like identity questions of like, where do I fit in and where is my role and what makes me special and who am I? One of my favorite books of all times, another one that I've read a million times, it's called The Heroine's Journey by Maureen Murdock. She's awesome. There's a workbook that goes with it as well. Highly recommend both.
Okay.
I'm not sure what time frame this was, but at some point she got to talk to Joseph Campbell, and she said, great, that's the men's journey. Where's the feminine journey? And he goes, the women don't have a role. They stay at home and they wait for the hero to return. She was mad. She was pissed. So that sent her on a 30+ year journey to codify and research and write out the feminine journey and have a rebuttal to that horrible statement. And I think that's just wonderful, of taking that feminine rage and saying, excuse me, I need to fix this. And so her book is beautiful. And one of the things that she says is that every woman's individuation journey, with individuation meaning becoming uniquely yourself or figuring out the unfolding of your own destiny through your life process, is that it starts with descent, meaning going down into the underworld, and all women's individuation journeys at some point involve grief. And she breaks it down into a bunch of different stages that I don't really want to go into for this, but I just wanted to introduce to you her main concept and this concept of going down into the underworld. What does that mean? The underworld
and I'm sure many of us have experienced things like this. It can be Persephone being abducted by Hades and being dragged into the underworld as a maiden. That's a very early journey where the masculine had a bunch of plans and took her autonomy away from her. She was known as Kore when the myth of the Homeric hymn to Demeter starts, which means flower maiden. She was just a kind of an unimportant flower deity. But her kidnapping and implication of rape by this older man is that she was sucked down into the unconscious, into the underworld, into trauma, very young. So that's one of those experiences that a lot of women have that have early childhood trauma. What I wanted to read a little bit from this book, Descent of the Goddess, written by Sylvia Britton Pereira. Amazing book. I've read it several times over the years. And one of the things I find interesting and she goes very deeply into the myth of Inanna, is that Inanna was a queen at this beginning of this story, unlike Persephone, who was a minor deity and basically a maiden child, that Inanna was already queen. But the first thing that she does is she puts her ear down to the earth and can hear her sister, Ereshkigal, crying and wailing because Ereshkigal's consort, her husband, has died. And Ereshkigal's in the underworld. She's the queen of the underworld. So you've got the queen of heaven and the queen of the underworld. And the first thing that she had to do was listen to the earth. So what does it mean to have an underworld initiation, first of all? Whether that's through trauma, through turning inward, it might be depression, of going down into the darkness, down into the unconscious. It's also this listening to the earth piece. It's listening within. It's listening to the earth itself, the cycles of nature. I got really excited Monday morning because the new crescent moon was starting to set, so it was like really big. And I just felt like it was a great way to start the week of me being aware and being able to give a few minutes to this new moon at the beginning of the week. Or how long do you spend outside? In Columbus today, it's raining a whole lot. Do you spend enough time outside that you can smell what the rain smells like? Things that we do where we really connect. Are we connecting to our food? Are we connecting to the creatures around us? I live in a decent sized city, and yet there's plenty of things for me to connect with if I'm taking the time. The migratory murder of crows just showed up, so I'm enjoying that. And we have squirrels and rabbits and deer, and there's a peregrine falcon that lives in my neighborhood this time of year. And in the summer, there's bluebirds. Are we paying attention to that, the cycle of the planet we live on that's right there? I also think turning our ears down to the earth could also be about listening to what's inside as a metaphor for introversion, for inner work, for contemplation of what our inner figures and inner voices are saying, what our emotions are saying. I talk a lot about how anxiety isn't something to run away from. It's usually an alarm bell that's trying to give us some information. But if we are put into situations where we don't think it's allowed to say something, to be angry, to speak out, or we don't have any power, that if you shut that alarm bell off long enough, it becomes disconnected from your consciousness, and that goes into the underworld. You still feel the alarm bells, but there's like alarm bells going off in the back of your head all the time. Oh God, what's going on? Because you've disconnected from allowing that alarm bell to do its job. So that turning to the ear to the earth piece can also be about starting to listen to the inner world, the psychic patterns within us, what connects us to the bigger picture, the whole, being able to listen to our own bodies and saying, what does my body need from me? Or am I ignoring it and sitting in front of a screen for too many hours until I wind up with pain from that? Or frequent inflammation that's asking for us to make a behavioral change in our lives, whether it's how we treat our bodies, what we're eating. Maybe we're just too busy. So there's literal congestion inside of our being. There's a lot in Jungian psychology that talks about a dance between our souls and our bodies, or psyche and soma. And so our consciousness, our emotions, the things that upwell and move us through experiences are interwoven with our bodies. And being cut off from either one creates suffering. So after Inanna has put her attention down to the earth and heard the wailing of her sister, she then decides to go down to the underworld to attend the funeral. I'm going to read a few lines from Descent of the Goddess. In the Sumerian poem, Inanna decides to go into the underworld. She set her heart from highest heaven on earth's deepest ground. Abandon heaven, abandon earth. To the netherworld she descended. As a precaution, she instructs Ninshubar, her trusted female executive, to appeal to the father gods for help in securing her release if she does not return within 3 days. Because you can't go to the underworld unless you're dead. And then she goes through a series of gates. And this is a motif we see often in dreams, of having to exchange items and be checked at gates by a guardian, and then having to go through different passages, and then having to wait at doors to gain passage. At the first gate to the netherworld, Inanna is stopped and asked to declare herself. The gatekeeper informs Ereshkigal, queen of the great below, that Inanna, queen of heaven, of the place where the sun rises, asks for admission to the land of no return, to witness the funeral of Gugalana, husband of Ereshkigal. Ereshkigal becomes furious and insists that the upper world goddess be treated accordingly to the laws and rights for anyone entering her kingdom, that she must be brought naked and bowed low. The gatekeepers follow orders. He removes one of Inanna's magnificent regalia at each of the 7 gates. Crouched and stripped bare, as the Sumerians were laid to the grave, Inanna is judged by the 7 judges. Ereshkigal kills her. The corpse is hung on a peg, where she turns into a side of green rotting meat. After 3 days, when Inanna fails to return, her assistant Ninshubar sets in motion her instructions to rouse the people and gods with dirge drum and lamenting. There's our descent. There's the beginning of the journey. A lot of times in grief process, it's not just about feeling better, but there's also a shedding of the old skin for the survivor, for the one who's grieving, of saying, in this place where I reconsider, and there's this great turmoil of emotion, what has this relationship made me? And who am I as I move forward changed from this experience? Sometimes it's regaining old sense of identity, things that have been lost long ago to the underworld. You think about the concept of like mining gold from deep in the earth. That gold can be things that were power, potentials that you lost. And a lot of times you've lost those things because your power was taken away from you, or you were silenced in some way or another. So to find those missing pieces and reconnect with them, that's a lot of times what we're starting to do. It's grieving the old self and then rebuilding a new sense of self, like Inanna, to put things together in a new way as she returns. That's where the word remember comes from, where it's a reassembly. It's remembering. Your members are put back together. I don't think everybody necessarily goes through this process. I'm assuming that any of you that are here probably have. But that's the difference of what people who go through an individuation process and have to question things and have to say, wait a minute, this doesn't feel right. I need something different. Where fate has given you a life initiation where you regain the things that are lost. A lot of times people talk about shadow work's a very popular concept right now. And I don't understand the direction that shadow work has gone into popularly, because it's about finding the dark parts of you. And I don't think that's what shadow is, especially for women. A lot of times, shadow is your sister, the queen of the underworld, that you have to go to meet and encounter, and you gain new appreciation and new power from her. This attendee, peer, sister is helping you regain balance and regaining power you thought you couldn't have. In Jungian terms, it's called a bright shadow, like finding your voice, finding assertiveness, finding a talent you thought you weren't allowed to use. Maybe it's finding leisure. And likewise, depression, from a Jungian standpoint, a lot of times can be a turning inward of energy so that you withdraw from the world, so an alchemical process can happen from the inside. Whether it's turning toward existential things, your own soul, reconnecting with your body, or rearranging your psychic makeup in a way that makes you more able to move forward to the next step, to get through that next gate. There is an issue with our culture, in my opinion, especially this time of year, where things start ramping up and getting busier and spending more money and eating lots of sugar, and there's just excesses everywhere. The weather's starting to get rough. It's dark. Our ancestors would have been finished the harvest, sitting at home. Maybe they'd be weaving or spinning or carving art or singing songs, just spending time with family, resting, dreaming. But we burn so many lights that we just keep powering through, and we miss this descent that the earth is doing right now. The trees, they pull their sap in, they lose their leaves so that they can store up their energy and wait for a new cycle. So where is the human fallow cycle? Very few people get to take a sabbatical. So as we go into the season, I want us to consider what your body is asking for you. Are you allowed to say no? It's an incredible potential for inner work, introspection, and reconnection with yourself, that if you're too busy, you miss it. But if you're willing to get still and put your ear down to the earth, that's when you start to hear it. So I want to do a little bit of a guided meditation and talk a bit. Be aware of your breathing. Breathe down slowly into the basin of your belly. Be aware of where your feet are, your weight, supported by your chair, the rise and fall of your rib cage as you breathe. And allow that rise and fall to feel like the movement of waves against a boat. Maybe it's a small boat, like a rowboat or a canoe. Imagine yourself on this little boat. The river isn't swift, but it's steady. The current takes you along with little effort. Up ahead of you, you see a little bit of mist clear, and ahead of you is the opening to a cave. And your boat is guided by the current, as if it's already been on this route. Your breath in sync with the lapping of the water, carries you down into this underground river. Your eyes adjust, and you phosphorescence, river creatures in the water, phosphorescent stones and mushrooms. It's gentle, damp, still. A pervasive stillness that holds you. It feels comfortable. And as you're guided along, you start to ask yourself, what have I lost that I'll retrieve here? Maybe it won't come to you now. Maybe it'll come by an idea or a dream. But you agree with yourself to listen to the voice in the earth, to reconnect with yourself, your body, and your soul, to find those treasures you lost. Maybe you have to refashion them. Maybe you have to find a new skin. Often the descent is seen as a counterclockwise spiral going down. But for now, see your boat moving back out into the light, into the noonday sun. Take a couple of deep breaths and wiggle your fingers and toes, maybe your shoulders, move your head a little bit. Obviously, in the course of a life, this is not a 5-minute meditation type of process. The more work that I've done with this, the more I've realized that our fear is the resistance to change. That most of the time when we start to understand and reconnect with what our pattern naturally is, like that return to the original source, that original pattern, that the more we do of that, the more helpful even the scary things in the unconscious become. Is sometimes they're scary because they're protectors and they're fierce and they're powerful, but not because they necessarily want to annihilate us. And the things that we do think want to annihilate us are wounded things that need help. The rules of reality are that to go to the underworld, you must die. That even the Queen of Heaven couldn't get around that. I don't think it was that Erich Kegel was being mean. It's just these are the requirements to come here, which is what made it part of the initiation. A lot of times initiations, they happen to us, whether we were asking for it or not. And you're like, what is this? And we see it as tragedy. And yet, without my biggest tragedies in life, I don't think I would like the person I am. I don't think it would have given me enough grit to be able to polish the stone. I wouldn't wish tragedy on anyone. Like that whole, like, everything happens for a reason. I don't think everything happens for a reason. I think there's a lot of really unnecessary human cruelty in the world. But we can learn from it. And it can temper who we are so that we become bigger. Yeah. It's not the big thoughts that we have when we're reading something inspiring. It's we show up when things are really hard. I think I did that with Carl Jung's Memory, Dreams, and Reflections. I read that when I was 16.
Nice.
I didn't know what I was reading. But it still planted a seed. It just took a while to germinate. The definition of a shadow is the things you cannot see. It's in shadow. And so if we see as consciousness as light, the things we can see, the things that we're consciously aware of, then the things that fall in the shadow are the things that we aren't aware of. It's not necessarily bad. It's just the things we can't see. And when we over-identify with the masculine because our culture wants us to, then we become subsidiary to it and we lose our own stories. Another good movie to watch other than Encanto, it's called Damsel. It was on Netflix a couple years ago. And it's a princess and a dragon, but it's very different.